Hello, I have so much to share with you. I had the last video, I had come halfway into the journey in Peru, where I was doing 8 ayahuasca journeys in 15 days with 4 shamans. And I was halfway through, I had this incredible expansion where my higher self came in and I could feel all this unconditional love and electricity and like my whole system feeling like I was a tree rooted to the earth, like branches up to the heavens, and electricity like lightning coming through waves of power. I was acclimating to, and then started to be able to connect to people in the room and feel what I can do, what kinds of healing and what kinds of presence and so on I could do. So that was my last journey. And since then, so much has happened. It's on an accelerated pace. I'm going to share with you what's happening on the planet, where we're going in a really short time frame, and what that's going to mean for you and people that you love, and what are things you can do in preparation for and in the midst of massive shifts across humanity. So where should I start? Okay. So since the last journey where I had that massive expansion, again, for the remaining 4 journeys, essentially, I went into deep darkness, contraction. And I went from, I think I explained in the last one, like mosquitoes and cockroaches to like wasps. I had my period that kicked in, so there was more release. But then I had continued to have diarrhea because I was releasing trauma from the system, especially like a physical and sexual trauma. I realized through my belly, that's my belly hurt. I was releasing. And that had started even well before the journey, but I continued releasing. And then when I'm in the bathroom, like I get stung by a wasp and my knee gets paralyzed and I'm like limping back to the temple for one of the journeys. I was like, I am in the depths of hell. And what happened was so dark, darker than I'd ever experienced it. It was like it felt like I was in an insane asylum. People were screaming and crying and primal sounds. And one guy attacked a woman and started choking her. Another guy at the retreat sexually assaulted a woman. There was like all kinds of things happening. And I felt myself getting sucked. It was like the noise, the cacophony. It was like a drug practically, like getting sucked into. And I felt myself starting to purge, vomit. And then I remembered, it was a faint memory as I was getting sucked in, to remember to ground my energy and open my heart. Even when I tried to open my heart, it was almost like it was weak. I had to fight. I had to use every fiber of my being and muster up all the courage to ground my energy and open my heart. And then as soon as I did that, I was able to maintain sovereignty and center. And the nausea and the kind of the getting sucked in, like I came back to center. And what they were showing me, it was like a crucible, like a training ground to show me the depths of darkness that the 3D world is going to move into over the next few months, and how to maintain sovereignty and how I can hold the high frequency in the depths of that darkness. So I realized that's what they were showing me. And what was happening between journeys was I was further drawn to David Clements, the theoretical physicist that went to Oxford and Cambridge, was in the same halls as Stephen Hawking, and had shared such high resonance of what I was doing. So one of the things that I realized was the Shushumna clearing that I do, that I was doing with when I do readings or when I do coaching sessions. It started with something I learned from a teacher, which was a quick scan where you clear the energy of the chakras and then you just have your energy come back to you. And then you start the session, so you're not carrying any of this energy or debris. What started happening in our coaching sessions that my business partner and I started doing was we started to slow that down. As we were going through each of the chakras, and as I mentioned last time, I would be moving my hand, I would be scanning each chakra from the 7th all the way to the 1st for any excess energy, any debris, anything that doesn't serve us, any pain or pressure, tension or tight, and then ask them to release that into the center channel. And then what I was doing was I was having them rhythmically breathe. So with each one, I'd have them breathe and keep breathing. And I would started to be able to feel the texture of each chakra. And when there were blocks, I could feel the resistance, and then I would keep moving my hands, and it would start to clear. And I'd feel releases happen in the back of my neck or in my jaw, and then they would start explaining often they different pains in their body, and they would feel it start moving either up or down, either up out the crown chakra or down into the ground. And so their pain would come and then it would dissipate, and they would be amazed at like how it was just dissipating. So was I, for that matter. But essentially then I'd go through each one, and sometimes emotions would come, they'd start crying. Sometimes guides would come in. Sometimes ancestors would come in and have these messages. So I was just, and what was amazing was, as I mentioned last time, David Clements talked about living energetics, the physics of the new world that's going to become more apparent to the mainstream, and modern physics, which is going to become the old physics. I described in the last one where it's like the energy is very dense matter is very dense, it almost operates like it's dead. So you have atoms, molecules, large-scale structures. You attach a battery to a light bulb, for example, and it'll discharge over time and eventually die. In the new physics that's coming up called living energetics, as you uncompress that energy, that matter, it starts to become plasma. David Bohm actually studied this. David Clements mentioned it. I was so drawn to David Bohm's work 6 months ago. But essentially, he studied plasma and how it's high temperature, uncompressed matter that starts to exhibit quantum characteristics, including being conscious, living intelligence. So it can self-heal. There's no aging. It can self-heal. And so what I realized, and these transformers that the Bedini, that Nikola Tesla talked about, and John Bedini and other theoretical physicists built, and then David Clements also built. And what they built was an iron core, right? So a transformer, you have an iron core, magnetic core, and then you have coil around the outside typically. When you spin the coils, you generate electromagnetism. And what they found was when the coils were a double helix and they spun it, when you put in a pulse input in, the output would be more than the input, perpetual energy machines. And the analogy that he used was, it's similar to the caduceus, right? So you have the two snakes, the medical symbol, two snakes moving around the central pole. And that was a similar symbol. New energy comes up when you have the double helix, spinning double helix. And my theory is, that he didn't talk about, but this is my understanding, is that from Vedic traditions, if you look at the ancient scriptures, they talk about Ida and Pingala, which are two energetic channels that revolve around the center Shushumna and the central energetic channel. There's two channels that revolve around it, like two snakes, like the caduceus, that are Ida and Pingala. So they are wrapped around the center channel of our energetic central line. And then as your chakras clear, the Kundalini energy starts to rise from the base, from the sacral. So it's the same exact concept. It's living energetics. And what I realized I was doing was, as I was clearing into the chakras, like doing this, and my higher self was coming in and guiding me through it, doing it for me, basically I was uncompressing that dense matter in each chakra, that all the blocks that are in there, and they're more and more dense, that blocks the flow of energy in each chakra. And then you have all kinds of physical and mental, emotional issues associated with that part of the body and that function. So as I was uncompressing it by doing this, basically the trauma started to come to the surface. And what I started feeling was magnetic energy in my hand. And what I realized after listening to David Clements' work was, that was the central core becoming, like the magnetism of it was becoming more activated. And then as it started to uncompress, I started to describe it. So then trauma starts to come up. It starts to feel like what I would describe as plasma. I've never felt plasma, but intuitively that's what I started to describe it as. It feels like the stuff of creation, like plasma. And now that's living intelligence. So it starts to self-heal in that chakra. And that's when trauma will start coming to the surface, and they start feeling different aches and pains and thoughts and emotions start releasing from the body, from the system. So it was self-healing, essentially. And then when it started to feel very clear, then I would go to the next chakra. So I was doing this in each of the chakras, essentially like tapping into living energetics, where it's living intelligence, self-healing. So my roommate at the retreat I was sharing with her, we were sharing stories about our experiences and our past, and I was telling her about my discovery of how Shushumna was very aligned with David Clements' disc meditation. One of the things that I didn't mention last time that was so fascinating to me was in the disc meditation he talks about, which is a way to clear trauma from the system, preparation, and a way to accelerate bringing your higher self in so that you can be led into the new world and know how to find your purpose, potential, and be guided. And what he said was that disc is essentially a spinning double helix, not dissimilar to the twister. I would describe it as a gentle twister moving through each chakra, and I have people envision that. And what he talked about with the disc, not 2D, but 3D in terms of the spinning helix underneath it. So it was essentially the same thing. So what I realized is the Shushumna, it basically has all the same elements that he talks about, but it's a much easier practice for people to do in a relatively short time frame. So so as I was sharing this with her, she started to feel, you do it for me. So I did the Shushumna for her. And it was incredible. Like a lot of her trauma started coming up. She started releasing things from the body. An ancestor came in, or someone she loved who passed away came in and was like communicating with her. Her guides came in, and then she'd been blocked for years. And then that night of the journey, she had massive breakthrough. where she was like self-healing and releasing all this trauma from her system. So then she wanted to do another one, and she continued to strength, and she started to share. So there was another woman who then approached me and asked if I'd be willing to do a Shushumna for her. And she too, for all the 6 journeys, wasn't experiencing much, and she was lost. When I did the Shushumna, it was equally powerful. She was feeling all these emotions come up. She was clearing all this trauma. She was unblocking. There was a curse in her system that she, like I heard from her guides what that was all about, and then was able to clear it from her system. So all of this in like this sort of 45-minute session. And then she had massive breakthrough that night. And she attributed it, she said it was life-changing for her. And she started to tell more people. And more people started coming to me, and I started doing more of these Shushumna. And what I realized was happening as I was moving through these journeys and releasing trauma in the depth of darkness, staying grounded and transmuting that energy rather than getting sucked in, I was continuing to clear the system. And so my capacity was growing. And then what was also happening was I was really drawn to David Clements' work. So in the day when we were free, we would do these journeys 2 at a time and then a 1-day break. During the day, I was actually tuning into David Clements. So he has a Patreon channel, which I highly recommend. And a lot of it's free. And then there's also, if you subscribe, like $9 a month, like nothing, basically for most, you can subscribe to some of the other ones that he has. And so I subscribed, and I was tuning in starting from number 1. He's got 38 now of these recordings, including his talks and in addition to the talks and interviews and so on. But basically, he started their activations that he had. The Elohim series that he did in 2023 are the first, I think, 13 or 14. I started listening to them, and he has different activations that come in. I started feeling these activations kicking in as I was listening to them. And I could feel all kinds of really like energy and like love and connecting to these galactic beings and feeling source intelligence and feeling my higher self kicking in all as I was listening to these. So I think what started happening was my capacity kept growing. So I started being able to do multiple Sushumna clearings at it one after the other. So even when I got back to the city, there were like people that were waiting that wanted to do them. Like even because I was going to head to the airport, I had 9 minutes left, and one person's like, "Okay, can I just do a 9-minute one?" And like I was able to do it like much more rapidly. I didn't feel tired like I did in the past, and I didn't feel aches and pains in my body that took time to reset. I was like energized after each one. I could do multiples. I didn't feel any tiredness. So this started, and people were experiencing again like massive trauma coming to the surface, major shifts happening like during and after the session, connecting with ancestors, connecting with loved ones that had passed away, connecting with guides, like just, and it was like again, popcorn out and watch the movie. Like it wasn't like I was actually doing anything other than just being guided and following my intuition. So all this was happening, and then during the journeys, and when I was listening to, so the last transmission that David Clements had was on the day that I was traveling back. It was a wild coincidence that the last transmission of these waves started on December 4th when I was traveling to Peru. And then the second one was on December 21st when I was traveling back the States from Peru. I had a transmission. What he was basically saying is, so in the one on the 4th, I think I mentioned the last one, it was activation of the earth. So 12 membranes all the way to the center, the 12 meridians in the Chinese medicine, in the body, not a coincidence. But essentially, the 12 membranes were activating, coming out of dormancy for the earth. Our contribution, we were asked to release our contribution to that dormancy. And then essentially, as the earth, Mother Earth is ascending, so are we. And essentially then, and as we clear and as we heal and as we ascend, our ability to tap into our higher self through the sacred hearts, rhythmic breathing is what David talks about. And all of us have a unique, like, rhythmic breathing that resonates the most, that takes us to the deepest state of relaxation and allows us to open the sacred heart, which is between the 5th chakra at the throat and the 4th chakra in the heart, between those 4.5. This is the sacred heart. And 4 is the heart, energetic heart chakra. And then your physical heart is on the left side of the body. So essentially, the sacred heart, 4.5, is connected to the infinity gateway, which is connected to all of source intelligence, love, everything. And then when it comes through, our higher self comes through, source intelligence comes through. It can then infuse the energetic heart and infuse the physical heart and the whole body, all the cell, emotion, the mind. And so you get infused with the source intelligence, and then you can be more easily guided down the path that your higher self designed for you and takes you to your gifts, quickly releases your trauma. You don't have to purge or suffer. And that was one of the things I learned in the journey, is that we don't have to vomit. We don't have to wait till it shows up. We don't have to go through therapy, all these tools and techniques. We can actually just ask our higher self to, and here's the phrase, whenever we get triggered, what you say is, please bring up the pattern or show me the pattern that this is from, break it down and wash it away. You know, my higher self, please do this for me. And then they can do it for you like that. So that's where we're at right now. So we don't have to suffer. And so that's what I was practicing. Instead of having to like purge, I was basically calling my higher self, and I could feel stuff being released and dissipated in the journey and even between journeys. And so while I was there, I didn't mention this part. So that night, that fourth journey where I had massive expansion, my higher self came in and I experienced really beautiful expansion. That same night, my husband was coming back from Peru. And as I've mentioned, he's my perfect polar opposite. And so he's this agnostic, clinical evidence-based physician, ER doc, actually, emergency medicine physician, who doesn't believe that there's consciousness or God or multiple lives or past lives or anything like that. Believe one life, you rot in the ground, everything's random, very left hemisphere dominant, which is how I was most of my life. We were both very aligned, and it was only in the last few years that I've shifted. Anyway, that night he was traveling back that same night from Hawaii. And he had a series of weird synchronicities occur where he like ended up having two planes that failed. One of them, like the plane stopped working. The other one, the runway got shut down. Ended up, instead of a 3 p.m. flight, he ended up having to spend the night at the airport after multiple delays. Didn't leave till 11 a.m. the next day. So he was 22 hours delayed. And when he said he got back, he said it was a trip from hell. He was exhausted. And I said, wow, mine was like a trip from heaven. So again, they were showing me the polarity between us. And how his is almost a representation of what's happening in 3D and mine's representation of what's happening in 5D. There was this wild and crazy kind of polarity that was being shown to me. And then, even when I tried to talk to him while I was in the journey, there was like anger, sarcasm, belligerence, dismissal, annoyance when I talked about what David Clements had to say, and like disbelief in new physics that I talked about and so on. So I was dreading coming back. What's that going to be like? And on the way back, I was listening to this transmission that David Clements had. And it was a transmission on the 21st on my travels back. And what he talked about then was it was an activation of the sun, the membrane, and the galactic center. So then the Earth, the sun, and the galactic center we're bridges. And so then we're ascending as they do. And then it's like basically, and what he said was, there's just membrane that's forming around the Earth, a golden membrane. And it's going to be completed in early to mid-January. He didn't know the exact date. Essentially then, as soon as it completes, the frequency within the Earth plane is going to rapidly rise. So we're in the primarily third dimension. The fifth and sixth dimension are going to become much more prominent. The frequency is going to rise. Like a radio channel, it's going to rise. So we're going to be able to tune into higher frequencies. And people that are clearing, tuning inwards, releasing trauma are going to much more rapidly. And those that are, and what he said was joy, following our heart, is the key to raising your frequency. So if you're hanging on to old belief systems and trauma, as the frequency of the Earth and the environment starts to rise, all of our lower energies, trauma, is going to come to the surface. So people are going to start acting really weird and antsy, and injury, illness, disease, mental and physical illness, they're all going to start coming to the surface. So if people who are able to release it are going to be able to step into the new world, the higher frequencies. And those that are not are going to have to leave the Earth's plane and go somewhere else that can sustain lower forms of energy, lower vibrational energy, which means it's going to get really dark. And that's what they were showing me in the journey it was in preparation of what's going to happen in 3D. We need people who can hold the frequency and stay grounded, open the heart, so that we can help people move into the new world and release. So the Shushumna, my abilities and path is growing as one of the instruments across the planet to help people move, release, so they can move into the new world. And essentially then, he said that in the fifth dimension, there's a lot of love and light, and there's a little bit of darkness. In the sixth dimension, there's no darkness. It's all light. And then he said, it's even possible, depending on what our choices we make and how it goes, that we even bring in the seventh dimension. And I had an astrology reading today with this astrologer, Stephanie Azaria, who's amazing, who monthly does this reading for me so I can understand what's transiting my chart, the energies that are moving through it, as a way to understand so much of what's happening in my life and what I'm being moved through. So it gives me more context and better understanding of it. And I'll have to share more of that in the next one because I haven't gotten the recording back yet. But essentially, she said that I have Pluto on the supergalactic center, which is the center of 4 clusters. And it's like source. So basically, and Pluto is transformation. So she said basically you're going to be tapping into source intelligence, source energy. And transmuting yourself and then helping to do that on the planet. You'll become a teacher of the highest order. I have Saturn and Sun together, which is apparently what it means. Lots of divine feminine in the chart. And the thing that was interesting was like in the journey, it got so dark in these journeys that we had mass, like divine feminine is rising. Noya Rao is tree of life, celestial, high feminine. And I felt no feminine in that space. It was like patriarchy, dominant masculine energy, suppression of the feminine. Some of the men even attacked some of the women in the journey and between journeys in these altered states. And I could feel the depth of that darkness. And that was a representation of what's happening in the collective and what's going to be happening in the collective. As much as we can, try not to get sucked into what's happening in the 3D. Tune inwards, ground your energy, open your heart. Tune into David Clements' Patreon channel. I'll include a link to the Shushumna recording of how to do Shushumna. And you can do it on your own. Do it every day. Go to the disc meditation that Clements has. Go to the Shushumna. Like any way you have to process the things that are coming up with a therapist, a coach, spiritual healers. Come to me, come to us if you'd like. But basically, it's like releasing it as much as you can from the system before, during, after these start to occur will allow you to start tuning into your higher self and tuning into the 4.5, doing deep breathing and asking for your higher self to come in. The thing I would say is I want my will to be divine will. So they would be an invitation. They don't override free will. So unless you invite the higher self in, they won't come in. That's a very hard rule for them. So those are the things that I highly recommend. When I got back, I was a little nervous about what it was going to be like with my husband. My frequency was much higher because I cleared so much. And when I got back, I could tell he couldn't be around me. He was running errands and he went grocery shopping and then he was like doing things. And I could tell there was like this discomfort being around me. And then that evening, we connected. And I'm going to put this in a PG manner. It was like our wedding night. The level of connection and our libidos were insanely high. I have never felt physically and emotionally and energetically close to my husband. It was like sacred union. And what was wild was in the morning, I was like, we were just snuggling up and I suddenly got this. And I've been one of those people most of my life, certainly adult life. I don't know how to have fun. I'm always like workaholic. What do I need to do next? Planning. Like my idea of fun is like reading nonfiction or I don't know, work is what I would say was fun. Suddenly I started getting these thoughts of when I was younger, I used to, and even into college, I would ride on the swings until I got really high. And at the top, I would jump off and like total glee, jump off and like land in the sand or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do that. And then I suddenly remembered like the thrill I would get from hide and seek and wanting to play it again, like the nervousness, like I'm going to pee my pants. Like I'm so nervous. They're going to find me, like that kind of excited nervousness. And then when they find you, like the squealing glee of being caught in hide and seek and then like laser tag. Again, similar kind of glee, like childlike glee, or escape rooms. I was thinking of all these things that brought me joy as a child that I was relating to and wanting to do again. And then I was sharing this with my husband, and he was like, "You know the world's gonna end?" And I said, "We're gonna move into high frequency where there is no darkness. There's gonna be pure light." And then people are gonna die, aren't they? Like people we know, people who love. He said, "What's gonna happen?" And I'm like, "They're of the new generation. I'm here, and my capacity has grown, so if they need Shushumna, I can help them clear their energy." And then he said, what about our parents? And what about me? And so I was like sharing, and I said, I'm here with you. Like, I can help you clear whenever you want. Can we do it right now? I was like, sure. I like sat up, and I started feeling into his energy, and it was remarkably clear. A couple of the chakras, like I had to clear, but it cleared like that. I was like, wait, that doesn't fit what I would have expected. And I thought, maybe because our energies are so intertwined, maybe he's cleared, or maybe like my power has grown so much, my capacity that it cleared really rapidly. And then I remember I had this Tantra master, for those of you that have been tuning in for a little while, that I worked with for a few months. One of the things she said was sacred union, like spiritual union of two people, actually is powerfully healing. It releases trauma from the system. And I think like through the night, we were so like deeply connected. We were releasing trauma from the collective system, from his system and my system. And I think that would happen. So it was through like love. It was through sacred union that he was healing and clearing. And I was, And then it was, since then, it's like completely different dynamic. Been so like incredibly fascinating. And then as I was like, all these ideas started coming in. Like one woman had suggested what you could do as you saw and heard about all these Shushumna clearings I was doing, and how much it was transforming people during their journeys, the ayahuasca journey. She said you could offer processing and integration before, during, and after these medicine journeys, plant medicine journeys. Wow, that would be really cool. And suddenly this morning, I started getting these thoughts of, wow, actually, maybe I could work with a shaman that I know, that I've worked with for psilocybin or ayahuasca, and actually incorporate Shushumna as part of it, like host it. And then I thought, wow, even our 10-week program, our coaching program, we could either culminate in a plant medicine journey or do it during and actually deepen it. And then one of the other things that happened was one of the guys that I met at the journey, at the retreat, actually, like, there was so much resonance, and we were sharing all of these tools and techniques and ideas and so on. And one of these he highly recommended was this book called Fountain of Youth. And essentially it was this book that talked about the Tibetan village that had these Tibetan rites that basically allowed people to like self-heal, and they became younger. So there was the guy that wrote the book that, about the person that he learned it from. Everyone estimated his age was around 40, and he was actually 73. So it was actually this really powerful set of basically there were 7 total, but there were 5 positions of yoga that you would do these. And it started with spinning. So it's almost like that double helix. And they said they would clear the chakras. And then this is you would self-heal and you would get younger. And this is similar to what David Clements talked about. And it was no coincidence. I actually got the book while I was at the retreat. And I read it in an hour and a half. I consumed it. And then I started doing the exercise. I realized if you can do those exercises along with this 10-week program, we do Shushumna, we could literally help people rapidly clear their chakra and start to self-heal and move into the new world and tap into their higher self, find their potential purpose and gifts and so on. So all these ideas were starting to come to me. And then right then, one of the women, like, I started getting these testimonials, and one of the women said that it was life-altering and like an hour, it completely changed her life. And now she's able to like actually process things on her own. And I shared these ideas with her. She's like, absolutely, like, we should do that. And then would you only do it in the US? And I was like, we don't have to. She was like, we could do it where she lives. And then I realized that we could do it anywhere around the world. We could start helping people and like bringing these tools and techniques and help people ascend and release the trauma. There's so much that's happening. And the key is joy. He talked about this, tapping into joy, things that bring you joy, like following your heart. That's the key to ascension. And then releasing things that come up that don't serve you, that don't help you. So keep going. And if you need help, reach out. Okay, bye.